Okay. So one thing I want to say before we get started with chapter 6. Are we on 6? I feel like we're on 6. Let's find out. Chapter 6 is, I'm going to put a little thing right here for my author signing dates. Yes, a lot of them are in Utah. I live in Idaho. We have 2 Barnes & Noble within a 100-mile distance, maybe a little bit further, in terms of where I live and where they are inside of Idaho. The rest of them, the closest ones to me, are all in Utah. So if you're in Utah, we've got extra dates. We've got new dates. Originally, I was only going to do 4 signings this year because that was kind of my plan. Last year, I was like, well, I can only really do 1 a quarter. And then Jake was like, well, I'm around in the summertime. Why don't you do more in the summertime? I'm like, okay, so we're going to try 1 a month just for the summer. So I already did my June. Or no, I have not done June yet. I did May already. So the ones that are crossed out are obviously already done. And then the ones below are not done. The dates are in the future. When this comes out, June will be the next one. And I think it will actually be next week. So like not this upcoming as in tomorrow, Saturday, but the Saturday after. So Saturday the 28th, June 28th, Saturday, I will be in Salt Lake City. And there's another thing. What is it? Oh, the Layton date is not finalized. They don't start making their calendar until 3 months ahead of time. So like I have to email them in August and be like, hey, can I have that date? Fingers crossed, it'll be fine. I will be emailing them like the second it is August 1st. I would think. Hi. So let's do chapter 6. Also, do you like my watch? It looked like the 80s and 90s threw up all over it. There we go. And I can't get over it. I love it so much. It's Shark Clip. Big fan. Okay. Monday, December 10th. December 10th, 2008. This morning's run did nothing for my restlessness. I still feel ready to jump out of my skin. It's like I have a swarm of bees following me around. In other news, watching Cam meet Grandma yesterday was so cute. He asked her a million questions, mostly about what Dad was like when he was a kid. Grandma was super clever answering him, but not saying a word about magic the whole time. Mom, on the other hand, is blowing this whole grandma thing out of proportion. She changed both the landline number and her cell number. Not that she bothered telling me this. I found out when I tried calling both. I need to know if I'm picking Cam up today, and neither could be completed as dialed. Now I don't know my home phone number, or if I'm supposed to pick Cam up or not. I told him I'd stop by anyway. French is starting. Nikki shoved her journal in her backpack and pulled out her textbook, wishing they were like normal schools with normal students who got to use lockers. But who was she kidding? Normal students? She and Emma, and she suspected Nellie, were as far from normal as normal got. Bonjour, classe. I apologize to all Francophile nations for what I'm about to do to your language. Avez-vous du plaisir avec vos devoirs? Devoirs? Madame Fleur came into class, her red scarf flying behind her. Oui, said the class in unison. Veuillez pratiquer nos verbes. Maintenant, répétez après moi. I remember that one from my French class. Madame Fleur said they conjugated verbs for the next half hour. Madame Fleur then paired them up and had them practice saying their favorite fruits and vegetables and why they liked them. All the while, Nikki felt the buzzing, the restlessness that hovered right under her skin. Eventually, she'd realize this feeling was her magic, trying to communicate with her. But for right now, she had no idea that something was very wrong. December 10th, 2008. So obviously, I have to keep this thing a secret. I can't tell anyone about it, ever. They'd either think, 1, I'm lying to get attention. 2, I can't handle the pressure of going pro. Or 3, I've gone totally nuts, and I'll get locked up in the happy farm. I've waited my whole life for 2 things, going pro and becoming an adult. Now both of those things are totally shot. This is the worst. Class, Mrs. Harmon said, eyeballing Nellie. Please turn your books to page 203. Nellie looked at her chemistry book, flipping through the pages until she found 203. They were looking at formulas of some kind, but it might as well have been Egyptian hieroglyphs for how much she understood. A small piece of paper poked her left elbow. Nellie turned and saw Emma pushing the folded paper over to her. Nellie glanced at Mrs. Harmon, who was writing on the board, and then carefully unfolded the paper. Hey, are you okay? You seem stressed out. Nellie let out a dry laugh. She grimaced at Emma and slid the paper back without writing anything. A moment later, it came back. When Nellie looked at Emma, Emma smiled encouragingly before returning her attention to Mrs. Harmon at the board. Mrs. Hammond at the board. It was Harmon, and I changed it, and now I'm regretting changing it because I'm going to say it wrong every single time. Mrs. Hammond at the board. Nellie looked at the paper. I found some cool information on Jess Pedersen. I think it might help you sort out what's going on. How is information on some dead person supposed to help me? How did you even find anything? All I can say for now is history repeats itself. Nellie glanced at Emma, who smiled and continued with her chemistry notes. Nellie gritted her teeth. Her heart felt the icy fingers of fear encircling it as she wondered if Emma knew she was a mermaid. Her brain told her, logically, it was impossible. She had only found out 2 days ago. So how could Emma know? For the rest of class, Nellie kept her eyes focused on either the board or her book, and though Mrs. Hammond thought Nellie was the epitome of attentiveness, Nellie's thoughts were far from chemistry. She was wrestling with this secret that buried itself inside of her, this secret that burned inside of her, this secret that demanded attention. The more she thought about it, the more she knew it was not the type of thing to share with every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Although there was one Tom she was going to have to tell sooner or later. December 10th. Y'all, we're just going to make all the mistakes today. Are you ready? Are you prepared? I'm glad. 10 December 2008. Nellie seemed pretty nervous in chem today. I wish I could tell her everything I know right now, but I have to time it and frame it correctly. Jess Pedersen was a fascinating woman. She didn't have any unfinished business, so I had to get a hold of her the old-fashioned way. Turns out Nellie is one mermaid in a long generation of them. But they've kept their secret so well that only her line knows about it. They never even told their spouses unless they were 100% positive the kids got it too. And sometimes not even then. Emma looked up from her journal and saw Nikki walking towards her. Oh, hi. She closed her journal as Nikki sat down in the desk next to hers. They had a few minutes until history started. How was your weekend? Nikki widened her eyes and cocked her head with a crooked smile. Emma smiled. That bad? My mom is pretending I don't exist, Nikki said, putting her bag down and adjusting her black yoga pants. My long-lost grandma left me no contact information, and I have no idea if I'm supposed to pick Cam up today because my mom changed all the phone numbers. Well, Emma said, I can't help you with your mom or Cam, but I do know where your grandma is. You do? Nikki leaned closer. Emma grinned and waggled her eyebrows. Apparently your grandma and my grandma go way back. Nikki audibly sighed. Duh, I should have known. She glanced around and lowered her voice to a whisper. How many magical little old ladies are there around here? More than you'd think, Emma whispered back. Before Nikki could ask Emma exactly what she meant, the bell rang and the last stragglers filed in, including Nellie, who came in and sat next to Wyatt on the other side of the classroom. He leaned over and started whispering to her, but she waved him off as Mr. Miranda started class. All right, class. Today is Information Exchange Day. Here's what I want you to do. Mr. Miranda walked around the class passing out worksheets. Move into your groups and answer these questions. He handed Emma 3 worksheets before moving on to the next student. Students shuffled around the classroom, some grumbling, some chatting. Chairs scraped across the floor as desks were moved into groups, and finally our 3 girls were seated together. Emma passed the papers out to Nikki and Nellie and then pulled out her purple horn-rimmed glasses. The girls read over the questions. 1. What is this person's story? 2. What can we learn from this story? 3. What is one interesting thing about this person you've discovered? 4. Do you see any similarities between this person and his or her relation in your group? Well, these don't look too hard to answer, Emma said to Nikki and Nellie. Who wants to go first? I can. So, question 1, Nikki said. Madame Ortega told me about how she was born into the circus. How her mom was an acrobat and her dad was an accountant. Apparently, her great-grandfather won the circus in a card game. Is that true? Nellie asked. Yes, Emma said, grinning. I guess it was a pretty serious game of Go Fish. Nikki chuckled. Anyway, so when she was like 7, she saw this girl who looked different. Madame Ortega described her as slightly transparent. Nikki said, reading from her notes. The girl needed help sending a message to her family. Madame Ortega found the family that night and gave them the message, and the girl was able to pass on. So, question 2, stop. Rewind, Nellie said, putting a hand up. Pass on? Pass on where? I don't know. Whatever comes after death, I guess, Nikki said. Nellie looked at Emma. Your grandma can see dead people? Like creepy, actually dead people? Yes, Emma said, and no. Nellie raised her eyebrows. Yes, she can see the actually dead. No, they're not creepy. They usually look just like they did in life, except they're a sort of transparent and glow a bit, Emma explained. Okay. Nellie squished her face together as she composed herself. Which part of transparent and glowing isn't creepy? I mean, I think she means they're not gruesome, Nikki cut in. Besides, from the way Madame Ortega told the story, the girl wasn't creepy, just sad. Fair, Nellie said. Nellie conceded, rubbing her arms. She was beginning to experience the sensing of other magics, but of course she didn't realize this. Nellie simply blamed the sensation on a general unease and her increased irritability due to a severe lack of surfing. Anyway, so question 2, Nikki said. Well, I think we can learn to help. I mean, Madame Ortega didn't know the girl at all, but she still helped her. Question 3, I think it's super interesting that she can see auras. What are those? Nellie asked. Right. So, Nikki said, scratching her head. They're people's energy, I think. She glanced at her notes again. Madame Ortega, She glanced at her notes again. Madame Ortega told me the parents had gray auras because they were overwhelmed with grief. But their kids had a mix of gray and gold because there was some grief, but also some excitement because they were at the circus. Nellie nodded and pursed her lips. So, Nikki said, last question. She briefly looked at Emma, who nodded. Nikki leaned closer to Nellie and said, Emma's a medium, too. Nellie leaned back and looked at Emma with an expression that suggested Nellie had been informed Emma could spontaneously explode. Are you serious? Nellie whispered. Emma nodded, looking more serious and less whimsical than usual. Nellie leaned forward. Wait, like you for real see dead people? Emma nodded again. She leaned towards Nellie and added, It's not an all-the-time thing. Just as I'm needed. It's kind of like being a volunteer firefighter. That's heavy stuff, Nellie said, her jaw relaxing a little. Wait, Nikki said, also leaning in. We're not really putting that on the paper, though, are we? Let's not, Emma said. Put down that I'm into weird stuff, too. So who wants to go next? Nikki asked as she scribbled in their edited answers. I'll go, Nellie said quickly. She was very much a rip-off the Band-Aid type girl, and at this precise moment, she was hoping to get her part over with as fast as she could. Sorry. I got a phone call. I'll call back. Okay. She was hoping to get her part over with as fast as possible and ditch the rest of class. She was definitely queasy enough to go to the nurse's office. So, Ashlyn O'Crane lived a super long time ago, like the late 1600s. She and her family lived in Salem, Massachusetts, hence 1692 MA on the photo. MA, Massachusetts. Makes sense, Nikki said. I don't know why I didn't see that. Nellie nodded. So I found out she was tried and found guilty of witchcraft. I found a book that had a little more information. I guess after she was, Nellie looked up at Nikki before she continued. Burned at the stake. Her family, her husband, 2 daughters, and a son, all moved to Ireland. They had originally come from there for a better life, but after the trials, they just went back home. She shrugged as though it might take away the sting of this news. I guess we know why she was a black sheep of the family, Nikki said, understanding more than ever what Ashlyn must have gone through. Did it say whether her family knew she was a witch? No, Nellie frowned slightly. Some local girl saw Ashlyn milking the family cow and heard her whispering weird words. The girl said all the other cows had run dry, but the O'Crane's cow still made milk. Pretty nuts, huh? No kidding, Emma said. So question 2. We can learn, Nellie said, not to milk our cows in public? That works for me, Emma said. Or that if you're going to do magic, you better make sure you don't have an audience, Nikki suggested. Yeah, that works too. Nellie shifted in her seat. Question 3. I think it was interesting, but mostly sad, how her family moved all the way from Ireland to have a better life, but ended up having a worse one and having to go back. I mean, I'm sure Ireland is awesome, but it just blows that Ashlyn died and they ended up at square one anyway. Last question, Emma said, pointing to number 4. Unless you're a witch too, I think the thing that is most common with you guys is the way you look, Nellie said to Nikki, right down to the braid. Nikki took a deep breath, ready to tell Nellie everything. Okay, my turn, Emma cut in, giving Nikki a look that said, not yet. I found out Jess Pedersen's story goes a little beyond what your mom told you. What your mom told you, Nellie. Apparently, she had a baby 9 months after she came ashore. There was nothing odd about it. Like you said, Jess and her husband had been married before he left Denmark, so it's natural to assume that when he found her, they celebrated their reunion sometime within a few weeks of her coming back. Yeah, is that it? Nellie grunted. She hadn't noticed Nikki's breath or Emma's odd behavior. She was too consumed with the kaleidoscope of butterflies growing in her stomach. No, actually, Emma said. Once she had the baby, her husband passed away. Apparently he caught pneumonia or something like it. Oh, he only got to hold the baby long enough for the 2 of them to pick a name for her. Ron. Her father picked it. According to my research, he said that she just looked like she belonged in the water, and Jess agreed. How do you know this? Nellie asked, white-knuckling the edges of her chair. Her sudden suspicion of Emma's methods did little to calm her queasiness. Emma had just admitted to talking to dead people. The priest of the little girl's christening kept accounts of all the children he blessed and any story he heard the parents tell. Apparently, the father was on his deathbed, so they christened the child in the house instead of the church. It sounds like the priest overheard Jess and her husband talking about the baby's name, Emma said. Did the priest say anything else? Nikki asked. Just that Ron seemed like an odd name for a little girl. It is kind of weird, Nikki said. I thought so too. So I did a little research into it. Both Jess and her husband were Danish, right? They must have grown up hearing about Norse mythology, kind of like we grow up hearing about Greek mythology. You know, Apollo, Hercules, Zeus, Aphrodite, and Athena, Emma said. Make sure you're answering all the questions, Mr. Miranda said, as he peeked over what God hath wrought. Emma peered down to the sheet. You were still telling her story, Nikki prompted. So you were doing the research. What'd you find? Nellie grimaced and nodded. The butterflies had turned into a swarm of bees, vibrating and pinching. Her leg bounced madly. Ran is a Norse sea goddess, Emma said. My ancestor was a goddess, Nellie grunted. No, she was named after a goddess. Emma scratched question one out. What we can learn from her story, which there is more of, but I'll tell you later, is that names carry a lot of meaning. No mother names her daughter after a goddess without good reason, especially a goddess whose name translates to theft and robbery, Emma said matter-of-factly. What's something interesting you learned about her? Nikki asked. Well, rumor has it that Jess's daughter, Ran, was not completely human, Emma said, lowering her voice. I followed the lineage right down to you, Nellie. And all along the way, there are rumors. Nellie glanced around. The families themselves were always guarded and secretive, but the neighbors talked. What did they say? The neighbors, the rumors? Nikki asked. Emma spoke quietly, but quickly, having noticed the greenish tinge to Nellie's pained expression. The rumors spoke mostly of the children that seemed to be more at home in the water than on land, children that weren't entirely human, children that were mermaids. Nellie swallowed and then said, Well, they're just rumors. Mermaids don't even exist. She smashed her notebook back in her bag, got up, and ran out. December 10th, 2008. Later. I feel like the tee-up to a bad joke. Emma basically told Nellie that her ancestor was a mermaid. Nellie freaked. Who can blame her? Meanwhile, I'm over here wondering how a psychic medium, a witch, and a mermaid all got put into a group project together. I'm waiting for Emma. We're going to head over to her grandma's place and see my grandma. Nikki's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Cam's school. Hello? Hey, Nikki, Cam squeaked out from the other side of the phone. It's me. So we start our long practices today. I won't be done until 6. Wow, Nikki said. Do you want me to bring you something to eat? No, that's okay. Mr. Melkin doesn't like us to eat because it gets our instruments gross. Will you pick me up at 6? Oh, and can Jody get a ride home too? Sure, Nikki said, making a mental note to take them both to grab a bite after practice. She couldn't understand why Cam sounded so excited. She had sat in on those practices. That band teacher yelled. A lot. See you then. Okay, bye, Cam said and hung up. Nikki set an alarm on her phone as Emma walked up to the car and hopped in the passenger seat. Are we waiting for Cam? Emma asked, buckling her seatbelt. No, Nikki said. He's got band practice until 6. Emma grimaced. That's what I said, Nikki laughed, shrugging. He sounded excited about it, but I always knew he was a weird kid. I wonder if he suspects how weird I am, too. Well, Emma said, there's a good chance he's your kind of weird, too. So, question about that, Nikki said, backing out of the school parking lot. My mom said something about my dad getting rid of my powers, but, obviously my dad didn't get rid of them since I have them, but why did I never know? Your dad couldn't actually get rid of your powers, so he likely bound them, meaning you couldn't use them. He probably bound them when you were pretty young, so odds are you were too little to retain any memories of magic. So why do I have magic now? Nikki waited at the stop sign. When you became 18, the bind was lifted to give you the opportunity to choose your fate. It's in your hands now. Hypothetically, if I didn't want my powers, could my dad bind them again? Nikki asked, not meeting Emma's eye. No, Emma said simply. You would have to relinquish them. Oops. I can't turn the page. There we go. You would have to relinquish them. That's why the bind exists. That way, one day, when the witch is ready, she can face her powers. To relinquish your powers is to give them up. Completely. You'd have no way of ever getting them back, Emma said. It's not a decision to take lightly. I can see that, Nikki said. Based on my mom's reaction, I'm guessing she didn't want to tell me and told my dad not to tell me. The rest of the drive, they talked about the very real possibility of Nellie being a mermaid. Pulling up to Ethel's house, just as Emma started explaining some of the differences between fictional and non-fictional mermaids. Upon opening the door, the girls were greeted by Kate, who was dressed in soft yellows and oranges. Merry meet, little witch, Kate hugged Nikki. Hi, Nikki said. Emma, this is Emma, Grandma. Emma, this is We've Met. Kate pulled Emma in for a hug as she let go of Nikki. Wait, what? Nikki said. Ethel had Rochelle and Emma over for dinner yesterday, and I got to meet this lovely lady, Kate said, keeping an arm over Emma, who looked as comfortable with Kate as she did with her own grandma. They also filled me in on a few things, and we need to talk. Your need to train is much more important than I first thought. What do you mean? Nikki said, looking from Kate to Emma and then back again. Kate turned to Emma. What all have you told her? Not much, Emma admitted. Kate nodded and then looked beyond at Nikki at the door, as though expecting someone else to come in after her. Where's the third? She hasn't fully accepted her powers, Emma said. Well, Kate said, giving Emma's shoulder a little squeeze before letting go, we'll have to make do with what we've got. Hopefully she comes around soon. What are you talking about? Nikki said. Take a seat, Kate said, gesturing to the dining room table before she disappeared into the kitchen. Ethel came in almost as soon as Kate left. She carried a tray which held 4 teacups, a pot of tea, and containers of honey and cream. The girls sat, and Ethel poured the tea. Hello, girls. Oh, my goodness. Hello, girls, she said. Emma, why don't you fill Nikki in while I help Kate with the sandwiches? Emma nodded and took a small breath, which she blew out of her mouth quickly. Okay, so you know how I'm psychic? Yeah, Nikki said. That's the part that sees the future, right? Yes, and technically psychics can see the fabric of time, the past, the present, or the future. Most of us just see one, and I see the future. But I only have visions that I will actually be there to witness. Anyway, 11 years ago, I had a vision. It was kind of fuzzy, which made it harder to decipher, but there were a few things I saw very clearly, which were, Nikki pressed, 2 teenage girls standing with me, streamers, and fire. I also heard laughter. And I'm one of the 2 girls, Nikki asked. Yes, I was 7 when I had the vision, so I didn't actually know you at the time, but I've had it several times since then. It's always exactly the same. I had it again in October, and I recognized you. So that's why you and Rochelle were talking. Trying to grab my water without looking. That's why you and Rochelle were talking about telling me, Nikki said, connecting conversations. Emma nodded, adding, I realized Nellie was one of the girls our freshman year of high school. So she is definitely a mermaid? Nikki asked. Yep. This is wild, Nikki said, shaking her head. Give me a second. She stood and started gesticulating and pacing around the space in front of the door and the table. You, me, and Nellie, she paced. A psychic medium, a witch, and a mermaid, she paced. Something with standing streamers, laughter, and fire. Nikki paused her pacing. So what now? In my vision, there were also the fuzzy bits. Parts that weren't clear, but over the years, I've been able to piece things together. I think we're meant to stop. Emma paused, looking for the right word. She shook her head and continued, I don't know. Something. I heard one other thing very clearly. Screaming. Lots of screaming. Part of it feels like I'm watching everything happen through a thick fog. But then parts of it sound like I'm underwater. I only get brief flashes of clarity. It feels dark. It feels like... Emma swallowed. I remember when I first had it, I thought I died. Died? Nikki squeaked. It fades to black, and it's dark. But it's not actually dark. It just... I don't know. I was only 7 the first time. It was terrifying. No kidding. Nikki pushed her braid to her back and started pacing again. So, when does this happen? Good question, Emma said. My best guess... Oh my gosh, so many pages. Who writes such long chapters? My best guess is around Christmas or maybe New Year's. Streamers could indicate a celebration of some kind, but it could be any time, Nikki said, leaning on the table with both hands. It could be someone's birthday party. All you really know is that the 3 of us will be there and there's streamers and fires, right? Emma sighed. Yes and no. The thing about my visions is that they're fluid. Sometimes they happen exactly as I see them, but sometimes they don't happen like I see them at all. Sorry, we're just going to quiet the phone because she's feeling chatty today, apparently. Sometimes I'm supposed to help it happen or stop it from happening altogether, but other times I'm not supposed to do anything. I just act as a witness and watch. Sheesh, Nikki said. How do you know the difference? Skill, said Ethel, coming into the dining room and carrying 2 plates, each holding a large bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, sliced cucumber, chopped carrots, and a generous serving of hummus. She set one plate in front of Emma and the other in front of Nikki's empty seat. Kate followed shortly after, carrying 2 more plates. Well, Emma said, blushing slightly, it's more like a feeling that comes with the visions. I've learned to trust myself and my instincts. Nikki covered her face with her hands and rubbed her eyes. You know that this is insane, right? Yep, Emma said, dipping a cucumber in her hummus. Nikki smeared her hands over her face, clapped them together, and said, So, how do we train for this so we don't die? Later. Can she know? I mean, she said my ancestor's daughter was a suspected mermaid and that she traced the line all the way down to me. But does that mean Emma thinks I'm a mermaid? Or does she know? This isn't fair. This isn't how it was supposed to go. I had a plan, and turning into a fish was never part of the plan. Ugh. Nellie chucked her journal at the wall, where it hit with a solid thud. There was a soft knock on her door. Hey, Nels? Tom opened her bedroom door tentatively. Dinner's ready. She groaned and mumbled, Okay. Anything you want to talk about? Not yet. I'll be out in a sec. As Tom left, Nellie took a deep breath, shoving the cold and steely fear down. It mixed with the hot anger bubbling in her stomach. Nellie gritted her teeth and took another deep breath, holding it for a moment before blowing it out her nose. Someday she would learn to use her breath to process these feelings, not simply push them away for later. But for today, she popped her neck and headed out to the dining room. Nellie, carrying a handful of plates and cutlery, Joe ran over to Nellie and whispered, I don't know where you were this morning, but you missed some awesome rides. Also, Whitney is telling everyone you're 100% dropping out of the next competition. Nellie rolled her eyes as she sat down at the table. As she finished setting the table, Joe added, I can't keep defending you. The best defense is a good offense, so you probably ought to get out there and show her what you've got. Please, Nellie scoffed. I serve better on my worst day than she does on her best. So you're coming tomorrow? Joe asked as she sat down. She raised her brows. Hot plates coming through. Tom held a sizzling cast iron pan filled with with caramelized onions and green and red bell peppers, sliced and deliciously blackened. He set the pan on the hot pad, which was already on the table. I didn't know we were having Christmas fajitas already, Nellie said, pouring herself some juice. Well, I wanted to try a new seasoning on the chicken before Christmas. Tom smiled and went back for the chicken. So when are you telling Dad you're not surfing anymore? Joe whispered once their dad was back in the kitchen. I didn't say that, Nellie shot back. You didn't deny it, Joe said, cocking her head to the side, an attitude move that made its sole appearance when Joe was confident in her argument. Why are you pestering me about this? Nellie rearranged the bowls of diced tomatoes, sour cream, and sliced avocado on the table simply to give her hands something to do. Because you're being weird. Usually if you're sick enough not to surf, you have to miss school, and we still have to basically duct tape you to your bed to keep you out of the ocean. So, Joe brought up her hand and began counting with her fingers. You miss surfing, but you don't miss school, plus you seem to be doing all of it voluntarily. Joe held up 3 fingers. Weird, weird, weird. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, Nels. Hot plate, Tom said, carrying another sizzling cast iron pan, this time filled with browned chicken that smelled heavily of cumin and chili. I'm starving, Nellie said. Throughout the entire meal, Nellie successfully managed to steer the conversation away from surfing, despite Joe's many attempts to talk shop. As they were clearing up after the meal, Joe washing dishes and Nellie putting leftovers in recycled yogurt and Cool Whip containers. Tom stood at the island, wiping his cast iron pans with a paper towel and a bit of bacon grease from yesterday's breakfast. He glanced at Nellie as she determined which container would be the proper size for the leftover chicken. Tom cleared his throat and said, So, are you thinking of getting back in the water? Nellie looked up, eyes wide as a kid caught in Mom's secret stash of chocolate. I I mean, she mumbled. Tom smiled. He looked a little sad, but mostly affectionate. You're not surfing anymore, are you? Nellie closed her eyes and shook her head, shoulders slumping. Tom sighed and set his pan down. Are you mad? Nellie asked. Tom chuckled softly. No, of course not, he said, moving around the island. He pulled Nellie into a hug that she gratefully accepted. I'm disappointed. Not in you, but for you. I know how much you loved it, and you've got such talent. You've worked so hard at surfing, and I know not going pro like you planned has got to be pretty gut-wrenching. Tom released Nellie from the hug and put his hands on her shoulders so he could look at her eye to eye. So you're really done? Nellie nodded again. I mean, maybe not forever, but I definitely can't compete ever again. Tom clicked his tongue and then said, Your mom warned me this day would come. I'll be the first to admit I didn't believe her, but she was right. Again. Sit down a sec. I need to grab something for you. He went to his room. Joe looked at Nellie and mouthed, What? Nellie shrugged back. She was as bewildered as Joe. Tom came back a few seconds later with a small package. Your mom said to give this to you the day you told me you couldn't surf anymore. He handed it to Nellie. I'm sure you've already figured out what this package is, but of course Nellie had not. To her, it simply appeared to be book-shaped. Mostly, she noticed the crinkled brown paper covering the package, the long strip of green fish net which was tied around it, and the shells that hung from its knot on the front. Nellie set it on the table and hugged Tom. Thanks for not totally freaking out, she said. Tom chuckled again. Well, I hope whatever it is that keeps you from surfing doesn't stop you from following your soul, kid. Your path is there. It might not turn out the way you planned, but it'll be better than you could imagine. Would you have done it again? Joe asked. She had quietly watched everything unfold from her spot in the kitchen. What do you mean? Tom asked. Knowing now what you know, would you still have married Mom, knowing you were going to lose her and have to raise us alone? Joe asked, her voice cracking. Is your life better than you could have imagined? Better than you imagined? Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought to keep them back. Tom stuck out his arm to her and beckoned her with his hand. Joe came over and joined the hug. I would do it again, in a heartbeat, Tom said. Losing your mom was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. She didn't leave me empty-handed. He gave each girl a squeeze. We've had our ups and downs, but Mom is here with us, and I wouldn't trade our family for anything. Not even all the money in the world, Joe said. Not even all the money in the world, Tom said. He kissed the top of each of his girls' heads. Later that night, alone in her room, Nellie opened the package. It was a book, as she had suspected, but it was also the strangest book she had ever seen. It had a turquoise cover with a yellowish circle in the center. Nellie touched the circle. It was hard and carved in the middle. She would discover later it was turtle shell. She tried opening the book, but the pages seemed sealed shut to each other. The book would not open. Nellie suddenly remembered what Emma had said about her ancestors being secretive and knew instinctively what to do next. Nellie took the book to the bathroom and filled the tub up with an inch of water. She knelt over the edge and placed the book in, partially sure it would work, partially wondering if she'd need ocean water. As soon as she submerged the book, the pages loosened and the book popped open. My darling little girl, if you are reading this, you've discovered our secret. It's passed down from generation to generation. I could never tell your father. There was never the right moment. Do not make the same mistakes I did. Confide in him and your sister. They are your family. They deserve to know and to be part of your life. Nellie traced the words with her fingers. Mom? So, that's the end of chapter 6. It was a little crazy in there. I apologize with all the much interruptions, but you never have to wonder if you're getting like a fake Instagram picture of my life or if you're getting the real thing as I'm sitting here looking at my children going, you're getting the real thing. Unedited, raw, gorgeous. Thanks for being here.